Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right. Ready, Jack? It's hot again. Hello and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network. And I am your very busy and hot host, Howard Fletcher. And I'm joined as always by my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug. And we are positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, we'd like to give you a very warm and grateful thank you. A grateful thank you. I guess that's kind of redundant for giving us a try. We appreciate you choosing us and spending your time with us. As I always say, there's a lot of media out there you can choose from. So I am very honored that you chose to let me talk in your ear for the next hour or so. We aim to please, so stick around. I'm sure you're going to hear something that you like. We want you to keep coming back. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how we feel about you. You are truly the reason that I'm here, that Jack is here. So let's have some fun. We have another jam-packed show for you today. My girl, Elle Fanning, I like Elle, has yet another show coming to Hulu. A theater chain that I talk about on the show a lot called AMC. Well, they're declaring that the worst is over. So we'll see where they're coming from as far as that's concerned. CBS is trying to make total access literally worldwide. Universal. So we'll see. Not Universal Media, but CBS. And I'll always bring you news as it breaks. You know, I like breaking news. I don't have any Batman news, but I have a Ben Affleck update. And I know he's not Batman anymore, but that's the closest thing I could get. So first, let's get started with some breaking Nolan is on the hustle news. Chinese moviegoers. Well, they're set up and ready for Christopher Nolan Bonanza on the big screen. His sci-fi epic Tenet will launch in Chinese theaters on September 4th, a week after the August 28th re-release of Inception. Meanwhile, the theatrical rerun of his 2014 Interstellar is blasting past competition at the box office as the top film nationwide since it hit cinemas on Sunday, August 2nd, bringing in $7.6 million so far in just 5 days. 3 other major U.S. titles are also announced in China with release dates. Greta Gerwig's adaptation of Little Women will launch on August 25th. Disney and Pixar's animated fantasy adventure Onward is now slated for August 19th, while Universal and DreamWorks family film Trolls World Tour, one of my favorites, is set for August 21st. Neither of the latter had strong theatrical releases anywhere else due to coronavirus, to COVID-19, meaning that their China run will likely be their most significant globally. Trolls World Tour, that is, made headlines in April for controversially being the first to skip its planned theatrical outing for digital due to the coronavirus. We've gone through that several times on this podcast. That's what got AMC pissed at Universal and my man John Fithian having a temper tantrum. Onward also skipped theaters for premiere on digital, and they're on Disney+. Tenet, starring John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, is expected to be the first Chinese release, or release in China, it's an American movie obviously, for a major Hollywood title that the rest of the world has not already had access to for months since the country shut theaters down in January. A number of Hollywood blockbusters originally scheduled to hit China in February, including Dolittle and Sonic the Hedgehog, neither of which are great flicks in my opinion, have premiered since authorities reopened cinemas on July 20th. Despite technically being new to the China market, these stale films have seen lackluster sales, in part because many viewers interested in them probably have already seen them pirated online. But also, like I said, Dolittle was a terrible movie. I feel bad. I like Robert Downey Jr. and it was from his production company. I don't know this. He hasn't said this that I've read. I'm just thinking that this might have been a passion project for him to do for his children. However, Dolittle sucked. Sonic the Hedgehog had its own production problems. They came back with a better looking Sonic, but I don't think either of those films would have done well anyway. And I do agree that yes, those people who wanted to see those movies probably saw the pirated versions anyway. Tenet was approved for release in China last week. There remains, however, some uncertainty around how cinemas will program the title. Current official Chinese guidelines for operating under COVID-19 request that cinemas not to play films that exceed 2 hours in length. Yet contradicting that directive, authorities have approved numerous films. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Wolf Warrior 2, for example, we've talked about that on this podcast before, that run far over 120 minutes, including Tenet, which clocks in just over 2 hours and 30 minutes, as most Christopher Nolan movies do. Cinemas in some regions have been asked to program a 5-minute intermission into longer titles, including Nolan's Interstellar. Others, afraid to contradict a directive from the national level authority, have decided it's not worth the risk of accidentally doing so by programming longer titles. I think, and I'm not an expert on China, I think a lot of it has to do with where your theater is located and how the state polices that area. I would imagine that theater owners in certain cities where there's heavy state control would be very tentative and probably wouldn't decide to, test the 2-hour limit. The confusion has not stopped most cinemas from playing these films, and there will likely be greater clarity on the matter before Tenet hits in September. Authorities will want to resolve the issue in time for its hottest competitor, the long-anticipated Chinese blockbuster, The 800, to make a proper splash. After its release, it was abruptly pulled last summer due to censorship concerns. That title, the biggest local film to announce a theatrical run in the post-COVID to date, is set to run to release on August 21st. But it runs at 165 minutes, which is over the mandated, the 120. So they have to worry about that. I think if Tenet is successful, I know they're going to let that film go or release that film. The release of Tenet is welcome news for exhibitors in China. Though cinemas have gotten permission to open, box office sales have been sluggish in recent weeks due to the lack of new content. Now, I pulled the last part of this from another recent show that I'm about to go over. And, I looked at my old script and doctored it up, but I think it's worth repeating, especially for those who missed that show, because this is why this is important and another reason why it's kind of on the TV podcast. China is far and away the most important foreign market for Christopher Nolan's films. The Chinese box office for almost every movie he's made as either a director or an executive producer has blown away earnings from other territories by a large margin. The only exceptions are Dunkirk and The Dark Knight Rises, for which China was the second largest market globally behind the UK, and Batman Begins, which hit the Middle Kingdom all the way back in 2005 when its box office was still comparatively nascent. Of the Nolan-directed films, Dunkirk made $51 million in China in 2017, while Interstellar grossed $122 million there in 2014. And as I just said earlier, Interstellar is running right now, and it's broken box office records for this post-COVID time. So they still love that. The Dark Knight Rises grossed $52.8 million in 2012, and Inception grossed $68.4 million in 2010. Films executive produced by Nolan have also seen strong showings in the country. They include Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice with $96 million, Justice League with $106 million, which is, who can, it did well too here. It was just a terrible movie. It was a terrible movie. That's why I'm looking forward to the Snyder Cut. Transcendence with $20 million, and Man of Steel with $63 million gross at the box office. So Christopher Nolan and Warner Media have good reason to believe that China can help them out. And if the Trump administration doesn't get in the way, because, our relations with China right now are not the best. So if we can still do business with China, I believe that that Warner Media and Christopher Nolan can make a good bit of their knot back in China on Tenet, especially given the numbers I just reviewed and the fact that Interstellar's done so well, and that there seems to be a hunger for people to go to movies in China. I don't believe, again, just from what I've read, haven't been to China, I'm not a Chinese expert. However, one of the differences, of the many differences between here and China, is that we have a very big broadband access here. There's a lot of internet here. A lot of people have access unless they're in very, very rural spots. That's a crime, if you ask me, but still, most people have access to the internet, to broadband. What does that mean? That means that we can all get streaming. So the Chinese audience, they don't have that alternative in the same proportion as we have here. So therefore, when the theaters are open, they're going to go to the theaters, be more inclined to go to the theaters than we will here in the United States, because we have an alternative. So all of that being said, as I've said before, I do believe that once that Chinese market opens up and we start seeing numbers coming out of China, that if they can get some good money back, if they can get over $100 million in China, or what looks like it's going to approach $100 million in China, and definitely if it starts approaching 120, I think 150 is asking too much, that Tenet will be on HBO Max by the Thanksgiving/Christmas holiday season. I don't think, because I just reported last week how Mulan went straight to streaming. And since Disney decided to make that decision, I don't think Mulan would have done as well as Tenet, money-wise, in China. It wouldn't have flopped, but I don't think they would make the money that Tenet's going to make. I just think if you have HBO Max and you don't want to go into the theater, I'm just putting my money on the fact that you're going to be able to see Tenet on the small screen. It might not be as great an experience, and I do think you're going to have the ability here to see it in some theaters if you opt to do that. But Tenet, I think, is going to be on streaming before the end of the year, like most things. Next, I am going to go over some things that CBS All Access or Viacom CBS wants to do in the streaming world. They have some very bold and high ambitions, as they should, because I think they know the streaming is the future. And also a little Ben Affleck news for those people who care. Go get some, thank you for listening. Go get some refreshments. I'll be right back. Don't go away. All right. Think I've talked about Tenet enough? I know you do, Jack. All right. Wow, it's hot coffee. CBS Viacom, or Viacom CBS, they have raised the curtains on its long-anticipated global streamer, with plans set for as early as 2021 for a launch. Having teased the prospect of a broad pay streaming product back in May, Viacom CBS Networks International has unveiled plans for a premium video-on-demand service for all audiences, underpinned by major output deals with Showtime and CBS All Access, and a quote-unquote super-sized selection of content from Viacom CBS brands, including CBS, MTV, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, and some first-run Paramount films. The streamer, which will receive bespoke branding in the coming months, will be rolled out early this next year in Australia, Latin America, and the Nordics, with more international markets to follow. In some countries, the platform won't be starting from scratch. CBS All Access is already present in Australia and will simply relaunch as the new streamer. The same applies for Paramount Plus service in the Nordics, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. The new platform, which was discussed by Viacom CBS CEO Bob Bakish on the company's earnings call on Thursday, will offer exclusive premieres on all Showtime titles, including new series Halo and American Rust, as well as CBS All Access originals like Guilty Party and The Harper House. To date, many of these originals have been sold to third-party global platforms and broadcasters in hugely lucrative outlet deals, and questions will now be raised about the future of these packs. Viacom CBS has confirmed to Variety, that's where I got this information in my report, however, that it will, quote, continue to license products selectively to third parties in international markets, end quote. For example, in the first batch of launch markets, the new service will be home to all Showtime premieres, but that doesn't include series already licensed to third parties. Here's a quote. We're going to continue working with our colleagues in our distribution team to work out the right approach to allocate rights and windowing in these markets. David Lin, president and CEO of Viacom CBS Networks International, says. We will have more than enough content to continue to do licensing, end quote. The question, however, is whether major titles like CBS All Access original Star Trek Picard, for which Amazon Prime Video swooped in for global rights and spent major coin pushing in markets such as the UK, will continue to be live on that platform globally beyond their original deal terms, or carry over to the new Viacom CBS streamer. Well, I can tell you what the answer to that is. Viacom CBS, if they launch this streaming service as described, as soon as their contracts expire with people like Amazon Video on Star Trek Picard, or whether they can get bought out, they're going to bring all that content over to their streaming service. Because as I've said on this show several times, the key to these streaming services' survival is original content. And since this is content that CBS created itself, and now that they have a place to put it after its initial run that's owned by them, they're going to take it back, in my opinion. Other programs set to launch in all three markets to varying degrees of exclusivity include The Good Wife, The Affair, Californication, Deadwood, Dexter, House of Lies, Nurse Jackie, Oz, one of my favorites, and the original Twin Peaks. The platform, powered by the same tech used for CBS All Access, will also combine movies from Paramount Pictures and premieres and box sets from Comedy Central, MTV, Nickelodeon, and Paramount Network, as well as originals from in-house production outfit Viacom CBS International Studios in some markets. Here's a quote. The content offering will vary per market, says Lin, highlighting, we're definitely going to produce local originals for the service in some, if not all, the Phase 1 markets. But the overall architecture of the service, as Lin sees it, is predicated on exclusive first runs of Showtime and CBS All Access originals, followed by a selection of first-run Paramount Pictures films and classic movies in some markets, and then the Viacom CBS box sets, along the bespoke local content. What's up with the bespoke, man? I mean, I just don't understand. The bespoke local market content in individual markets that are either local originals or third-party acquisitions as the executive. Okay, now I guess they're calling them bespoke because it's tailor-made or it's from the original market. But let's just say it's in Lithuania. He's just saying that they can, I guess what he's saying is that if there is a Lithuanian program that is created by some Lithuanian affiliate of Viacom CBS, that it will run on there. That makes total sense. I don't know why it has to be, I guess bespoke sounds better. Who knows? Ultimately, the platform will look to serve 4-quadrant viewing by combining blockbuster and classic movies, premium scripted series, kids and comedy entertainment, reality, and specialist factual content. All right. Notably, niche preschool streamer Noggin, available in 65 countries, will remain as a distinct platform. In other words, if you have kids, they know you're going to get this stuff, so they're going to charge you again. That's just the way it goes, folks. Kids are an expense. They're a joy, but they're an expense. Launch markets have been selected strategically. In Australia, the existing 10 all-access services will be rebranded and significantly expanded. Meanwhile, the Latin American launch spans Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, and the Nordic countries include Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. The rollout will be executed using CBS Viacom's existing international infrastructure, which spans offices in more than 30 countries, to improve cost efficiency and allow investment to be focused on screen. Pierluigi Gazzolo, I think I pronounced that one right. That would be a new one for me. President of streaming for VCNI, which I'm assuming is an Italian affiliate, added, quote, with more than 200 million new streaming subscriptions due to come online internationally by 2025, we're very confident that we can build a meaningful subscriber base in the next few years. Viacom CBS is one of a very small handful of elite content companies with broad enough content pipelines and deep enough content libraries to lead in all segments of the video entertainment market, end quote. Well, I will say I don't have CBS All Access. I have sort of put them in my mind on a second tier. Well, they are second tier compared to Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus. That's not their fault. That's just the way it is. However, it looks like they are trying to be a player, and you better, in this market, in this segment, because streaming is extremely, extremely competitive. And what's going to happen here is what I'm sure happens in the social media market, where streamers like Shudder and smaller ones that are very specialty, they will probably be gobbled up by some of the larger streamers out here. So I'll report this news as it comes up and let you know what's going on out there, but it's lots going to be in flux, I believe. A report like the one I just made is going to be commonplace, I think, for a while. Here is some Ben Affleck is no longer Batman news. Forget it, Ben, it's Chinatown. I couldn't resist saying that. Ben Affleck will dig deep into Hollywood history with an upcoming adaptation of The Big Goodbye, Chinatown, The Last Years of Hollywood. And that's an inside look at the making of the film noir classic Chinatown. I was about to say it's one of my favorite movies. That's probably overstating it. I really like that movie. The film has been set up at Paramount, which is only fitting given that it was the studio's legendary head, Robert Evans, that helped with the incisive look at power, money, and corruption in Los Angeles into existence. I mean, Robert Evans, I don't know if you saw the HBO documentary Kid Stays in the Picture, where it was autobiographical. Robert Evans narrated it. It's worth watching, not so much unless you're, I won't say a lot of people are necessarily Robert Evans fans, but if you're a fan of Hollywood and the way Hollywood used to do business back in the 60s and 70s, you should definitely watch that movie. Affleck will adapt the book by Sam Wasson as well as direct the film. Saturday Night Live creator Lorne Michaels will produce the picture along with Affleck. Let me say this about Lorne Michaels, because I've been critical of him in the past, although very mildly critical of him. I think he has he almost has a place on the television Mount Rushmore. Now, I wouldn't put him up on the mountain, but if there's like a Mount Rushmore television museum where they have honorable mentions, Lorne Michaels is definitely in there. But the thing I like about Lorne Michaels is this. He supports artists without judgment. And I'm sure many of us are familiar, or many of you are familiar with Ben Affleck's troubles of late, but he's a very talented guy. Like him or not as an actor, he's very talented. I think he's a very good director, and he's a good screenwriter, if nothing else. And Lorne Michaels sees that. So he doesn't hold any of those things against him as far as his, and he's probably, he said he's been sober, and I think things have been worked out well for him, hopefully. But I like Lorne Michaels, and I like how he, hangs in with people regardless of their maybe spotty or troubled past. Chinatown is considered to be one of the greatest movies ever made, with career best work from Jack Nicholson and all involved. But Watson's book makes it clear that the production was often bumpy. Director Roman Polanski clashed with its star Faye Dunaway, who got the role after Jane Fonda passed. John Huston filmed a key scene while in his cups, meaning John Huston got a little juice too, and Jerry Goldsmith's haunting score was an 11th hour addition. In the end, however, these big personalities all helped create one of the seminal works of 1970s cinema. Affleck has had success in the past looking at Hollywood history, directing Argo, the story of how the CIA used a fake film production to infiltrate Iran to Oscar glory. Affleck most recently starred in Warner Brothers' The Way Back, a sports drama about a recovering alcoholic who returns to his high school to coach the basketball team. Critics praised his performance, but the movie generated lackluster ticket sales when it was released right before theaters started to close due to the coronavirus. Affleck's latest outing behind the camera was 2016's gangster film Live by Night, which he also wrote and starred in. The movie also featured Elle Fanning, my girl, Chris Messina, and Zoe Saldana. It was a box office flop. It cost $65 million to produce, but ended its theatrical run with a paltry $22 million worldwide. Let me say this about Live by Night. Live by Night is not a bad movie in my opinion. The pacing's kind of slow. I don't know where they spent the $65 million. That's, one of those things when you see what it costs to produce a movie, think about when you're watching it, think about where the money went. I don't know where that money went. The movie's well produced, but I don't know where the $65 million went. That movie also was not well promoted. I don't think a lot of people even knew it was in the theaters unless you happen to be walking in the multiplex. I knew about it because I stay on top of this type of stuff, and I barely heard about it. So I think there are a lot of reasons why that movie flopped. I still think that Ben Affleck is a talent as far as screenwriting and producing and directing, so we'll see how this goes. Some of his other credits include he was in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which famously flopped. That was not his fault. The Town, fantastic movie, and Good Will Hunting. Both of those movies are very, very well done. So, as well as Gone Baby Gone and some others that he has directed. So, I look forward to this. I kind of pull for Ben Affleck, as you can probably hear. I think I didn't until that whole J-Lo thing, and I felt bad for him because I think, J-Lo, I'm not a J-Lo fan. So, I just think Ben Affleck, I hope he comes back strong. I hope this movie should come back strong. It should get a lot of eyes because I said in this report, Chinatown is a classic movie. There are a lot of big personalities such as Faye Dunaway, Jack Nicholson, John Huston that were around that film, Roman Polanski. So I just think that subject matter wise, it's set up to do well. Let's hope it does. Hopefully they will keep the budget under control. And I think this film they should be making this film thinking it's going to go on video on demand. They should not be making this film like it's going to be on the big screen, because I don't think it's going to, if it goes there, I don't think it's going to be there very long. So they should make it that way. Hopefully they do. Next, I'll tell you a little bit about my girl, Elle Fanning, who I just mentioned. And AMC is thinking that the worst is behind them. I'll let you know what I think about that too. Thank you for listening. I'll be right back after we pay some bills. Don't go away.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
I thought that Ben Affleck was a pretty good Bruce Wayne. Batman, not so much. But, you know, Jack, what can I say? All right, we're back. Elle Fanning. That's what I said we were going to be talking about, so let's talk about her. My girl Elle Fanning is adding a second Hulu show to her resume. The star of The Great has signed to top line a limited series called The Girl from Plainville at the Disney-owned streamer. The show, ordered straight to series, is inspired by the real-life story of Michelle Carter, who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in June 2017 in a controversial texting suicide case. There was a documentary about this on HBO I think is worth watching. It's a very interesting case. I think Elle Fanning is like perfect casting for this part. The show will use an Esquire article by Jesse Barron as its source material. The series will explore the relationship between Carter and Conrad Roy III and the events that led to his death and her controversial conviction. Carter eventually served 11 months of a 15-month sentence after exhausting appeals in the case. Liz Hannah, who produces The Post and Hulu's The Dropout, and Patrick McManus, he produces a show on the Peacock called Dr. Death, will serve as co-showrunners and executive produce The Girl from Plainville. Fanning and Echo Lake's Brittany Ward will also executive produce the show from Universal Studios group Universal Content Productions. Elle Fanning, I always have to I take a double take when I look at her age. I think she's 21. I could look it up, but I'm not going to. I think she's 21, might be 22. And she has done so much in her career. And, you know, now she's executive producing this. And I think this is, from what I can tell, I may be totally wrong about this, but I don't think so. I think she is helping to put this together. And I think Elle Fanning is somebody who is almost going to be like Charlize Theron, but she has almost like a 15-year lead on Charlize when she started doing this type of stuff. So I look for Elle Fanning to be a major player possibly in the future as far as putting Hollywood productions together. Barron and Aaron Lee Carr, who directed the HBO documentary I Love You Now Die, that's the name of that documentary I was just telling you about the case, will be consulting producers. Kelly Funk, love that name, will oversee for McManus's Littleton Road Productions. Fanning is coming off the first season of The Great at Hulu, where she stars as the future Catherine the Great. The series, which Hulu has renewed for a second season, earned Emmy nominations for writing and directing for a comedy series. The Girl from Plainville joins a roster of limited series at Hulu that also includes Emmy nominees Little Fires Everywhere and Mrs. America, which I still have to finish. I got about 2 more to go with Mrs. America. I liked it very much. I like it very much. I'll tell you when I finish it. Catch 22, The Act, and 11/22/63. So I look for big things from Elle Fanning, and I look forward to The Girl from Plainville because, like I said, the documentary I Love You Now Die was very intriguing, and I hope they do that case justice with the dramatization. We'll see. Here is some AMC is surviving news. Most cinemas in the U.S. are closed. Major summer films have been pushed back indefinitely, and studios keep selling their movies to Netflix. But Adam Aron, CEO of AMC Theaters, struck an optimistic note on a call with investors and analysts shortly after the world's largest exhibition chain reported that it had lost more than $500 million in its most recent financial quarter. Here's a quote. "I think we've survived the corona crisis, and we've now just got to get back to running the company really well," Aron said of a public health catastrophe that has brought the theater business to its knees while raising questions about AMC's liquidity. Aron was in an expansive and a magnanimous frame of mind during the hour-long question and answer session. He trumpeted the fact that AMC, which has been seen as bankruptcy risk, has renegotiated its debt and added cash to its balance sheet, while noting that the company had put stringent cleaning measures in place so that it will be able to safely welcome guests back this month. And he was particularly eager to take a victory lap when it came to AMC's recent deal with Universal, which will allow the studio to release movies in the home as early as 17 days after they open theaters. Under the pact, Universal can rent its films for a 48-hour period for at least $20 a pop. In return, AMC gets a cut of the revenue that Universal makes. Now, as I said before, I didn't have the numbers and I didn't say exactly what it was, but I did suggest on this podcast that AMC should work toward some type of understanding with Universal like this so that they wouldn't totally cut them off like they said they were going to do for running Trolls World Tour on video on demand. Here's a quote. "I'm expecting that this is going to become an industry standard," said Aron. "I expect that some of our competitors will do this, if not all," end quote. That is probably true. Though that should be true if they want to stay in business. What Aron is not saying, in my opinion, is that they really had no choice but to do this AMC. And it's a move that I thought was done. I'm glad he did it. I mean, for the company's sake, I think he needed to do this. I don't think they went about the best way publicly to do this. And I think the way they went about it, as far as publicly criticizing Universal, undermined their leverage in their negotiations. But this is a deal that had to be made. And I do, as much critical as I am have been of AMC, I do praise them for making this step, because I think this is a step that was inevitable if they wanted to stay in business. Here's a quote. "I do realize that some of our competitors are anxious about this change," Aron said. "Change is always difficult for some to cope with." He added, "We've researched it, we've modeled it, we've thought about it, we've argued about it, we've debated it, and we're sure that we're coming out ahead," end quote. Well, I would imagine that's true, that they are coming out ahead, because at least they have some content to run. And the way the deal is structured, as far as I understand it, is that Universal can pull their movies out in 17 days if they choose to, but they don't have to. So if it's a movie that's just a blockbuster and has a long run, everybody profits off of that. And if Universal can pull out in 17 days, then AMC doesn't take a total loss, and neither does Universal. I think it's a good deal. I just think that AMC probably could have done better than what they negotiated had they not waited so long. Aron did not disclose how the deal with Universal was structured. However, he said that the company would be compensated for every rental, not just the ones that happen in zip codes where AMC has theaters. Aron also clarified that Universal won't be allowed to disclose when a film's going to be released on another distribution channel, meaning premium video on demand platforms, until after it's been in theater for 10 days. Aron pushed back at suggestions that making Universal titles available to rent earlier would discourage movie fans from going to the cinemas. Here's a quote. There are certain advantages to watching a film on a 40-foot screen to watching it on a 40-inch screen, said Aaron. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that people will do anything to get out of their house or their apartment. If you told me right now I could go and spend 3 hours at a hardware store, I would tell you that's an exciting afternoon, end quote. Okay. He doesn't quit his day job and stop with the jokes. The Walt Disney Company recently roiled, I love the word roiled, some movie theater owners when it announced that rather than release Mulan in theaters, it was going to make it available to rent on Disney+. Aaron declined to criticize Disney, arguing that the studio's decision illustrated the wisdom of AMC's pact with Universal. That's growth, okay, I'm telling you. Because that dude wants to take down Universal for not putting Trolls World Tour in their theater. And this is Mulan, and he's like, I'm all right with it. Here's another quote. Quote, just like AMC is under duress, Disney is under pressure too. And at some point, they've got to monetize their movie product. End quote, said Aaron. That's what I've been saying this whole time, Aaron. Man, it took him a long time to figure that one out. He said he hoped Disney would think about adapting a similar model to Universal, in which it had the flexibility to show movies in theaters for a shorter run before launching them on streaming. Aaron's attitude is markedly different from his stance on early video on demand last March, as I reported on this show, when COVID-19 closed theaters and Universal opted to release Trolls World Tour on demand. AMC threatened to stop showing Universal's films altogether. Now Aaron is a full-on convert to the idea of smashing windows. The industry term for the amount of time a window shows exclusively in theaters. Here's a quote again from Aaron. We would not have signed on to an economic program that we thought was negative. Aaron went on to argue that because AMC was the first major exhibitor to agree to an early on-demand deal, its deal would be richer. Quote, you should assume that we got the first mover advantage, Aaron said. End quote. I would disagree with that, but he got the advantage of not going bankrupt, so that's one thing that they did well. Aaron also praised Warner Brothers for committing to releasing Tenet in theaters this fall. The Christopher Nolan thriller was initially slated for July and was later moved to August, but its premiere was then postponed when coronavirus cases in the U.S. surged last month. The film is now expected to open in select domestic cities over the Labor Day weekend. Quote, I think Warner Brothers is doing something heroic for the exhibition industry by releasing Tenet in a few weeks, he said, assuming that it doesn't slip. Aaron did drop one interesting item. He noted that AMC's new safety and cleaning procedures will be expensive and that the costs will be passed on to the consumers. That could mean higher ticket prices or that popcorn gets to be more of a luxury food snack. Okay, first thing. All right. Number one, I don't know the last time this part of something I got from the Hollywood Reporter. I don't know the last time this particular guy went to the movie theaters, but I'm telling you, from this guy's point of view, popcorn is a luxury snack food in theaters. It's ridiculously expensive for what you get. Anyway, this is what I've been saying all along. Ultimately, I think that going to the movie theaters is going to be a more exclusive situation. It's going to be similar to going to see a play on Broadway or going to a concert. You know, if you're going to pay a higher ticket price, fewer people are going to go, but you know, the accommodations will be really great. So you might have to pay $50 a seat to go see Tenet in, you know, super IMAX on a recliner with popcorn and cup holders and all of that. You know, it might be an expensive night out. Just like going to go see an NBA basketball game. Who knows? But that's just the way it's going to be, I believe, after this. And I think ultimately it was going to be that way because of technology changes. And I think it's going to be more comfortable to watch something at home than going to the theater, unless you specifically want that experience, in which case it's going to cost you. Ultimately, on the call, Aaron described what he said was a brutal quarter, one that he had labeled as one of the hardest in AMC's 100-year history, by predicting that the marquee lights will soon flicker back on and that moviegoers will return to cinemas. He ended by saying, quote, we are very close to theaters opening soon in the United States. See you at the movies. See you at AMC, end quote. Well, Well, those of you who listen to this podcast regularly know that this is my story I like to talk about. And the reason I wanted to talk about this particular phone call was it gave us a chance to see how AMC is spinning this thing right now and their point of view about this deal with Universal. I do believe that this was the thing that they had to do. I think it was the right thing to do. I think Aaron is saying what he needs to say as being the CEO of the company. I don't think that they negotiated the best deal they could, but they weren't in the position to negotiate the best deal they could. They were about to go under. And they talked a lot of smack before doing it, which also hurt their leverage. That said, I do agree with them that, yeah, it could mean higher ticket prices. It's not just going to be because of the cleaning procedures. That's not the case. It's going to have to do with demand and, scarcity. I just don't think people are going to be going. They're going to have to raise ticket prices. Likewise, they're not only going to have to make the place cleaner, but they're going to have to make it a luxury experience for you. So you won't want to just wait till you go to be in your house. And I do think that some movies, now that we have different technology and now that we have people that, that we've had a chance that we were forced to have to experience being at home and watching home theater. And I think movies, and my prime examples like A Quiet Place 2 that's coming out, would be people will prefer to watch that in the comfort of their homes. I think it'll be scarier to watch a movie like A Quiet Place 2 at home than in the theater. Not only safer right now, but it's just going to be a better experience. I think people are going to choose that rather than go to the theater to see those smaller releases. Next, well, I don't know exactly what I'm going to bring you next because there are a couple of things that came across the wire. I will tell you what they are. Please stay with me. We're going to pay some bills. Don't go away. All right. Last one, Jeff. All right. These things just came over, so I thought I'd end up the show with this. I think we have the next YouTube personality, artist, and one of the first TikTok sensations to make it to the big time. Comedian Sarah Cooper, who has found fame on social media by lip-syncing President Donald Trump's unhinged coronavirus tangents, has scored a Netflix comedy special. It's going to be called Sarah Cooper, Everything's Fine. And it'll premiere this fall in 2020. So a couple of months away. Miss Cooper is going to be flanked by an array of talent. Natasha Lyonne will direct, and Maya Rudolph will executive produce, along with Danielle Renfro-Behrens and Lyonne through their production company Animal Pictures. Cooper and Paula Pell will also executive produce. The special, described as being short interviews, sketches, and vignettes, will feature Cooper and guests on the topics of politics, race, gender, class, and other light subjects. Now, Cooper used to work at Google, but she's become a viral star during the COVID-19 pandemic. Her first video, How to Medical, on April 23rd, went viral on TikTok, Twitter, and other social media platforms. In it, Cooper plays Trump talking about quote-unquote light and quote-unquote disinfectant as possible coronavirus cures, with a confused Dr. Deborah Birx standing by. She has since become ubiquitous, with appearances on The Ellen Show, The Tonight Show, as well as hosting Jimmy Kimmel Live. She's also been selected as one of Variety's 10 comics to watch for 2020. Cooper's How to Medical wasn't her first experience with viral success. In 2014, she published an essay on Medium titled, quote, 10 Tricks to Appear Smart During Meetings, that exploded, and she turned it into a book, 100 Tricks to Appear Smart in Meetings and How to Get By Without Even Trying. She's also written a book, How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings. So I like Sarah Cooper, and we're looking forward to seeing what her special is going to be like. I always wondered, I was familiar with her through the lip-syncing thing. I've never seen her stand-up comedy, although I realize that she's purportedly a stand-up comic. So I'm looking forward to this, to her new face, and I hope that she's really successful. Now, here is some breaking, that's all, folks, news. Warner Media has begun a round of layoffs with the entertainment giant letting go hundreds of staffers amid the coronavirus crisis that has crippled Hollywood and shelved tentpoles and production shutdowns. Sources say the first wave of layoffs is expected to be around 600 staffers, with a heavy focus at Warner Brothers. The laid-off employees will include Warner Brothers CFO Kim Williams, Warner Brothers Worldwide Television Distribution President Jeff Schlesinger, and Ron Sanders, Warner Brothers President Worldwide of Theatrical Distribution and Home Entertainment. That's a big title. And Executive Vice President of International Business Operations. They need to lay that dude off just so they can, just make a smaller sign. My God. I mean, I'm talking about his door sign. Those are a lot of titles, man. The pink slips were handed out in departments encompassing film and TV and come in the aftermath of a major restructuring at the company that saw Warner Media Entertainment and direct-to-consumer chairman Bob Greenblatt and content chief and TBS, TNT, and True TV president Kevin Riley ousted last week. And I've mentioned Kevin Riley several times on this show because it did seem like he was balling out of control with running all of those networks. But he's not anymore. The cuts also follow a series of Hollywood layoffs and furloughs that have affected agencies like CAA and Endeavor and such studios as Universal, Disney, and Lionsgate. Here's a quote. Jeff, Ron, and Kim are all highly valued members of my senior leadership team, and we will be forever grateful for the many meaningful and lasting contributions each of them has made to Warner Brothers, said Ann Sarnoff, chair and CEO of Warner Brothers, and newly announced head of Warner Media Studio and Network Groups. I thank them all for their dedication and years of service, and I wish them the very best in their next chapters. Added Sanders, quote, Warner Brothers is known for being the most celebrated studio in history for good reason. The talent is unmatched, both on the creative and business sides, and I'm honored to have been entrusted to oversee a great portfolio of businesses around the world for the last 30 years, end quote. Now, just to give this a little context or clarity, what Warner Brothers is doing is pretty much streamlining the whole biz. Warner Brothers used to be Warner Media, TNT, all those companies, all those networks I mentioned, Turner Broadcasting, all of that. They're going to bring all of that under the Turner Media umbrella, and so that they don't have as many heads, so many people. It's just not as spread out and diverse. I think this is now the guys that they laid off. Let me be very clear. This guy, Kevin Riley and Bob Greenblatt, they were big boys. These are serious dudes in the TV industry, but they made their bones on broadcast television. And they were brought in to do exactly what they did. They did a good job of getting some things up and running, and I think they were highly credited for getting HBO Max up and running. And you know how I sing the praises of HBO Max. However, I think that they're not being dismissed for being incompetent. They're being dismissed because this is one of those hard decisions that corporations need to make to say, look, we need to bring in people that are better suited to where we want to go. Unfortunately, especially in the media business, most it happens in all businesses. Usually that means people that are younger and more familiar with what's going on the cutting edge out there. I'm not worried about these two guys because I think Riley and Greenblatt will both land on their feet if they even need to work anymore. That's the deal too. These guys should be in pretty good position to retire. Sources say Warner's Atlanta base, which features scores of staff in cable TV operations and marketing divisions, was especially impacted. And you heard where they were, cable TV operations and marketing divisions. Like other media conglomerates, redundancies with other similar departments from other divisions are among the first to go. On the film front, Warner Brothers has not been immune to the challenges that have rocked the industry. The studio moved its highly anticipated summer film, Tenet, multiple times. It is opening internationally now on August 26th, as we mentioned on this show several times, followed by a U.S. release in select cities over the Labor Day weekend. The studio also bumped the Wonder Woman sequel off its original summer release date, as well as the John Chu-helmed and Lin-Manuel Miranda penned musical In the Heights. The former is scheduled to open October 2nd. The latter moved to summer of 2021. Now, Howard's going to make another one of his famous predictions. In the Heights is going to go to video on. It's not going to go to the theaters. No one's going to run to the theaters to see a musical by next summer. They're not. It's going to go on video on demand and streaming. And I would imagine the production costs of In the Heights should not be, it'll work going to streaming. Now, the changes arrive at Warner Media under new CEO Jason Kilar. And he's putting a newly launched streamer, HBO Max, front and center, which we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. The service, which launched on May 27th, was hoping to convert many of the linear cable network HBO's 30 million plus subscribers, which costs the same amount. But HBO Max only added 1.1 million HBO customers and 3 million retail customers in its first month. The rollout was hampered by the company's ongoing negotiations with Amazon and Roku about bringing the app to their connected TV devices. More than 2 months after the launch, HBO Max still isn't available on either platform. And as I mentioned, that's held me up. Once it goes to Amazon, then I can get to it from my Amazon Cube. I will get HBO Max. I can have access. I have access to it because I have HBO on cable. But I'd rather watch HBO Max on my television set than on my computer. Here's a quote. "It's been a great 37-year run with 26 as president of international television distribution, spanning 6 mergers, millions of miles traveled, thousands of programs sold, and billions of dollars generated," Schlesinger said. "In the end, it took a global pandemic and a couple of reorganizations of the company for me to trip over the last hurdle. I hope to always be remembered as the only studio executive to ride into an international screenings party at the studio on the back of an elephant in the good old days." End quote. Yeah, that's probably in the good old days, because the days of, boozing it up in a orgy with circus animals, that's not going to happen anymore. Hollywood, I don't believe. Added Williams, quote, "Warner Brothers has a unique and wonderful history, heralded and iconic. It is one that I am proud to have been part of. It is also filled to the brim with the best and brightest. I will cherish my time at this great company. The restructuring comes as legacy media companies continue to make major executive suite changes amid a landscape that increasingly places streaming as its top priority. Last week, NBC Universal outlined a similar strategy and folded all business operations under Francis Berwick, while a search continues for an executive to oversee entertainment programming across streamer Peacock, as well as NBC and the company's suite of cable networks. Viacom CBS, for its part, has also consolidated its executive ranks in the past year, with Chris McCarthy adding a growing number of networks to his purview. The novel coronavirus has forced many legacy media companies to tighten costs amid declining profits, with many insiders noting that the restructuring should have taken place well before the pandemic created an economic reason to do so. The global pandemic has shuttered movie theaters from Beijing to New York as social distancing becomes the new normal across the globe. Studios, including Warner, have been forced to shutter production on major tentpoles like the most recent outing of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. A number of studio parent companies had addressed the fallout from the virus crisis, including Warner Media owner AT&T, and signaled cost-cutting measures to come. On March 20th, as the pandemic's fallout became more clear, the telecom giant said it was canceling planned stock buybacks, including an accelerated share repurchase agreement with Morgan Stanley to buy back $4 billion of its stock in order to remain financially flexible. Quote, "The impacts of the pandemic could be material, but due to the evolving nature of the situation, we're not able at this time to estimate the impact on our financial or operational results," AT&T says, end quote. Well, I read all of that and wrote some of it, and I reviewed some of it because it made clear that, look, the media world was going through a big transition anyway. It just got accelerated to the nth degree geometrically because of this pandemic. And so a lot of these companies are having to make hard decisions in a short period of time, and they wish they didn't have to do that. But on that high note, that will be the end of this episode of the GSMC Television Podcast. We're brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like you to do me a favor and please subscribe to the show and write us a nice review. That really helps. We're still trying to grow the show. We have a good listenership, but every little bit helps, and I'd love to stick around. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be great. Please remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com with any requests for the show and any feedback on any of the stories I talked about today. I read all email on the show, and those of you who listen to me know I love to do that. Listen, I know we're in some strange times. We're in some challenging times right now. We need to all pull together to get through this. We are in a worldwide pandemic still, so please remember to wash your hands as often as possible. Limit your personal and close interaction with people if you can, which means, you've heard it, socially distance, and wear a mask if you go out of the house. It's just the best thing to do. I know some of you don't like it, but it helps us all out. We want to get past this, so let's do that. I want you to have a safe and fun weekend. Until we meet again, please stream with care. Jack and I love you guys, so please be kind to one another. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.